Next, coming back to the theory section, we're now dealing with an extended response questions. Here we are asked to explain how long-term active immunity develops in the human body after infection by a pathogen. So, we will write, when specific pathogens enter the body, they carry antigens on their surface that are recognized by lymphocytes. These lymphocytes respond by starting the production of antibodies, which are special proteins chemicals. Each antibody is complementary in shape to its antigen, allowing it to bind specifically to it. This binding does not usually destroy the pathogen directly but instead marks or clumps the pathogens together, making them easier to be engulfed and destroyed by phagocytes. At the same time, memory cells are produced, so that on the next infection by the same pathogen there is a much faster and greater production of antibodies, providing quicker protection. Now moving on to the second part of the question, the examiner asks us to suggest factors which may contribute to this variation. For this section, we will clearly list and explain the contributing factors. So, we will write, in a group of humans, differences in immune response can be due to several factors. The number of lymphocytes and their ability to produce antibodies varies between individuals, affecting how effectively infections are controlled. Age also plays a role, as very young and elderly people often have weaker immune responses. In addition, previous exposure to a pathogen, either through natural infection or vaccination, immunization, can strengthen immunity, allowing some individuals to respond more quickly and effectively than others. Moving on to the next question. Here, the question states, a virus is a type of pathogen, and Figure 2.1 shows the external structure of a virus. As shown in the diagram, the structure illustrated is a virus, and one of its features is labeled F. The first part of the question asks us to identify component F. Now, from the diagram, we can see that component F is part of the external structure of the virus. Therefore, the correct identification is the protein coat, which is also known as the capsid. The next part of the question then asks us to identify one component of a virus not shown in Figure 2.1. In this case, the correct answer would be the genetic material of the virus, which can be DNA or RNA. Writing either DNA, RNA, or simply genetic material would be acceptable and marked as correct. Then we move on to part B of the question. It states, pathogens may be transmitted to humans either by direct contact or indirectly. List 2 of the human body's barriers to the entry of pathogens. Here, we're simply being asked to name body barriers, so the answer is straightforward. We can write skin, and mucus or the mucous membranes. Other acceptable answers that would also gain marks include stomach acid, tears, or cilia. Next, we move on to part C. The question states, if a virus is able to pass through the body's barriers, an immune response takes place. Antibodies are produced during this immune response. It then asks us to name 4 chemical elements that will always be present in an antibody molecule. To answer this, we recall that antibodies are proteins. All proteins are made up of amino acids, which always contain the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So, we can list carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. In addition, sulfur is also commonly present in antibodies because it is found in the amino acid cysteine, which forms disulfide bonds in antibody structure. Also, we move on to another question, which now asks us to explain how the structure and function of an antibody molecule are important in an immune response. This is a 5-mark question, so we need to answer it carefully and clearly. So, we will simply write as, antibodies are important in the immune response because pathogens have antigens on their surface that trigger a response. Each antibody is specific and has a complementary shape and structure that fits exactly to its antigen. This allows the antibody to bind to the antigen, forming an antibody-antigen complex. The binding does not usually destroy the pathogen directly, but it marks, clumps together or immobilize the pathogen, making it easier to be recognized. As a result, the pathogens are engulfed and destroyed by phagocytes such as macrophages, helping to eliminate the infection. Next, we move on to part D, which states, the average length of pregnancy in an adult human is 40 weeks. A human mother may give birth to her baby before the end of the usual length of pregnancy. This is known as a premature birth. The question then asks us to suggest why babies born prematurely are at higher risk of developing some infectious diseases than babies born after 40 weeks of pregnancy. And, here, we would write, babies born prematurely have an underdeveloped immune system, so they are less able to fight infections. They also receive fewer antibodies from the mother across the placenta, which normally provide protection against infectious diseases. This is because premature babies have less developed immune systems, for example, fewer white blood cells and less mature immune responses. So, they receive fewer maternal antibodies or the passive immunity via the placenta, as most antibody transfer occurs during the final weeks of pregnancy. And, the skin and mucous membranes, which serve as physical barriers, may also be underdeveloped. Finally, in the next part of this question, it asks, suggest one action that a mother can take to protect her premature baby from infection in the weeks after birth. So, here, we would simply write, breastfeeding the baby. This is because breast milk contains maternal antibodies and other immune factors that provide passive immunity and protection against infections. Other possible actions include maintaining good hygiene, for example, washing hands before handling the baby and limiting the baby's exposure to people who are sick. So, we are back onto paper 1 questions. So first, the question is, which statements about mosquitoes are correct? About where mosquitoes lay their eggs and about the sex of the adult mosquito that sucks blood. The correct answer is C, in stagnant water, female. Mosquitoes lay their eggs in stagnant water, not decaying organic matter. Only adult female mosquitoes suck blood because they need the protein from blood to develop their eggs. Next, the question asks, the spread of HIV was reduced in many countries between 1990 and 2010. Which action assisted this reduction? The answer is B, health education. Health education campaigns promoted safer sexual practices and raised awareness about HIV transmission. This was the main factor in reducing the spread of HIV during that period. An effective vaccine was not available, antibiotics do not work against viruses, and while drugs were developed to slow disease progression, education was the primary prevention tool. Next, the question is, which statement about the immune system is correct? The correct answer is D. As antibodies are specific protein molecules produced by lymphocytes. They bind to antigens, either destroying pathogens directly or marking them for other immune cells to eliminate. This is central to how the immune system targets and removes invaders. Finally, the question asks, for which disease can antibiotics be used as an effective treatment? The correct answer is A bacterial infection. Antibiotics work by targeting specific structures and processes unique to bacterial cells, such as the cell wall or protein synthesis machinery. They do not work against viruses, like colds or flu, non-infectious conditions like coronary heart disease, or malaria, which is caused by a protozoan parasite. Again, we have some more paper 1 questions here, so let's look at them now. The first question asks, how is malaria normally transmitted from person to person? The answer is C. Infected mosquitoes. Malaria is caused by a parasite that is transmitted to humans through the bites of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. It is not spread through airborne droplets, contaminated needles, or sexual intercourse. The next question asks, which function of the blood will be affected if a person inhales carbon monoxide? Here, the correct answer is B. The carriage of oxygen to the body's organs. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin with a much higher affinity than oxygen, forming carboxyhemoglobin. This prevents the hemoglobin from carrying oxygen efficiently, which leads to oxygen deprivation in the body's organs. Then we have a question asking, which diseases can be cured with antibiotics? The correct answer is D. Antibiotics are effective against bacterial infections. Cholera is a bacterial disease and can be cured with antibiotics. Lung cancer is a non-infectious disease, and HIV infection is caused by a virus. Neither can be cured with antibiotics. The correct table option is D, which indicates that only cholera can be cured with antibiotics. Now, let's look at this conceptual MCQ where we are analyzing a graph. The question states, vaccination helps to control the spread of transmissible diseases. The MMR vaccine is given to young children and provides immunity against a disease called measles. The graph shows the percentage of the population of a country vaccinated using the MMR vaccine and the number of cases of measles over time. If we observe this graph, we notice that vaccination rates generally decrease while measles cases increase, but this does not happen every year. From 2004 to 2008, vaccination rates actually start to rise, so statement A is incorrect. Looking at the actual numbers, vaccination was 91% in 1998 and dropped to 80% in 2004. This decline in herd immunity corresponds with spikes in measles cases, which makes statement B correct. Statement C is wrong because in 2003, there were about 400 cases, not 80, and in 2005, about 150, not 76. This mistake happens when the numbers from the vaccination axis are used instead of the cases axis. Statement D is also incorrect because while cases rose from 2005 to 2008, this was due to the lag effect from previous low vaccination years. The vaccine's effectiveness is clear because when vaccination was at its highest, the number of cases was at its lowest. Overall, the trend shows an inverse correlation. As vaccination decreases, measles cases increase. This demonstrates herd immunity. There is also a time lag, which explains why cases spike a year or two after vaccination rates begin to fall. Finally, during 2005 to 2008, vaccination rates started to recover slightly, but they were still below the 1998 levels. Since the virus was already circulating in the population, the number of measles cases continued to rise despite the small increase in vaccination. So, the correct answer here is statement B. The percentage of the population vaccinated decreased from 91% in 1998 to 80% in 2004. This may have led to the increase in measles cases from 2001 to 2003 and from 2005 to 2008.